My name is Sophie. I'm 33 years old, born and raised in a traditional American family in Austin, Texas, where expectations were neatly wrapped in watchful stares and dinner tables never missed the question, "So what's your plan for the future?" In my house, there was an unspoken rule. If you're a daughter, you're expected to fit perfectly into the mold our parents created. Go to college, preferably Vanderbilt or Rice. Graduate work in an office with a nameplate, a dress code, and most importantly, a retirement plan. Get married before 30, have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and live no more than 20 minutes from your parents so they can conveniently drop by on weekends and teach you how to salt your stew properly. I used to think I'd do exactly that until I was 22 in my final year studying finance at UT Austin. When I realized I felt like I was sitting in a locked box, I woke up every day with a silent question. Is this really going to be my life? I loved colors, shapes, light things that in my family were dismissed as artsy nonsense. Switching my major to interior design was the first shock I gave my family. My mom, Margaret, responded with a sigh. I'll probably remember forever. My dad, Edward, simply flipped the newspaper and said flatly, "You're giving up stability to draw chairs." I didn't argue. I packed my things and moved into a tiny studio apartment in Chicago where I started an unpaid internship at a boutique design firm. My parents called it chasing a fantasy. They regularly sent me links like top 10 stable careers for women or why getting married before 30 sets you up for life. I tried explaining gently. Then came the debates and finally silence. The farther I got from them physically, the closer I felt to myself. I started landing. My own clients got invited to collaborate on projects in New York, then Boston, Seattle, even London. The work was freelance, but not flimsy. I learned how to work remotely, pitch ideas over Zoom, send drafts at midnight, and receive feedback across clashing time zones, but I never felt tired from it. On the contrary, for the first time in my life, I felt alive. At 30, when I skipped Thanksgiving to complete a major contract with a boutique hotel chain in Switzerland, my mom texted me one line, "If even family comes second to your job, who do you plan on putting first?" I read that message in a cold kitchen in Zurich, holding a cup of black tea, unable to stop a quiet, bittersweet smile I had spent my 20s trying to make them understand. But the truth is, not everyone is ready to see you become something they can't imagine. I didn't get married at 25 like they wanted. I don't have kids or a perfect house with a white picket fence. But I do have my own design studio, a team of talented collaborators, projects stretching from Los Angeles to Tokyo, and a life that I know without a doubt is mine. Built by me, brick by brick, drawing by drawing. Still, to my parents, that's not enough because in their view, if I don't have a husband who's a doctor or an engineer, then everything I have is just an illusion. Then one day I got a wedding invitation from my cousin with a handwritten note from my mom. "Hope your imaginary boyfriend can make it." This time I read the card 3 times. Not angry, not sad, just sighed because they didn't know the man they called imaginary had just booked a flight from Singapore to make it to the party with me. And not only is he real, he's about to make everyone in that room see me differently. I used to think if I was patient enough, my parents would understand that if I proved I was happy and successful, they'd stop asking, "Why aren't you married yet? Is working online even a real job, or is your boyfriend even real?" I was wrong. When I told them I was engaged to Liam, an international aviation consultant who splits his time between Singapore and Abu Dhabi, my mom's first reaction wasn't joy. It was a raised eyebrow followed by a skeptical, "Oh, do you have a photo?" she asked. I opened my phone and scrolled to a picture of us at Marina Bay, hand in hand, beaming with Singapore's dazzling lights in the background. She glanced at it and handed it back with a dramatic sigh. "You know, Photoshop is really advanced these days, right?" I froze. I had braced for them not being excited, but for my own mother to imply I fabricated a relationship, that I edited a man into existence to impress them. That cut deeper than any critique before. She didn't stop there. She brought it up at a family dinner. Joking, Sophie says she's engaged, but no one's seen him. No photos, no video calls, no presents. Might be a model from an interior design magazine. The table burst out laughing like I'd told a funny story. I sat there gripping my water glass, hands trembling. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. But I said nothing, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew anything I said would be twisted into Sophie's being dramatic. Why so sensitive, or worse, guilty conscience? Worse than doubt is pity. They didn't see me as a grown woman making her own choices. They saw me as a failed child trying to seem okay after missing the life train, as my aunt put it, a woman in her 30s, unmarried, living far from home. Of course she's lonely. Maybe she made him up to feel less empty, she whispered to my mom, but loud enough for me to hear every word. I left that dinner in silence. No one called after me. No one apologized. Liam called the moment I got in the car. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concerned. I paused, then laughed softly. "My family thinks you don't exist." He was quiet for a beat. "Then maybe I should show up properly." "Duh," he said, calm and deep. "I've got a work trip in New York next month. Want me to accidentally appear at your cousin's engagement party?" I laughed this time, not to hide my feelings, but because I knew something was about to change. "You sure they'll analyze every inch of you?" "I'm real. I'm flying real, and I really love you," Liam said. They, on the other hand, seemed to need a reality check. I leaned back, watching streetlights blur past the car window. What I felt wasn't satisfaction about some kind of revenge, but relief. That someone was finally standing beside me, and this time I wouldn't endure alone. I'd walk into that room differently, not begging for trust, but putting an end to years of doubt, belittling, and being treated like a joke. They used to laugh. But at my cousin Chloe's engagement party, no one will be laughing when Liam walks in, and I'll be there right next to him. Not to prove anything, but to show them. I never needed their belief to live my truth, but now they won't be able to look away. The engagement party was held at a luxury resort on the edge of Lake Tahoe. Every detail meticulously arranged, from silk runners down the aisle to a jazz band playing under a glass-roofed garden. My whole family was there, dressed to impress eyes, gleaming with pride as if their golden niece was marrying royalty. I arrived alone. Liam was still in a meeting in San Francisco, but he said he'd try to make it in time. I wasn't worried, I knew he would. The moment I stepped in, every eye turned. Not because of my one-shoulder deep red dress or the elegant updo, but because I was still alone. My Aunt Chloe's mom walked over with a deliberate smile. "Sophie, are you still single then?" she chuckled, glancing around. "Or are we still waiting for the mystery boyfriend to fly in from Asia?" Laughter rippled around the table. I didn't respond. I just nodded slightly and walked straight toward the reception area where Chloe was taking photos with her fiancé, Nathan. A dentist. The textbook definition of the stable son-in-law my family always dreamed of. Chloe hugged me like a true sister. She was the only one who never mocked me. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her eyes sparkling. "I hope today won't be too exhausting for you." I smiled and nodded, but I knew the real exhaustion was just beginning. I hadn't planned to say anything at the party, I just wanted to come congratulate my cousin and quietly leave. But when the host invited family members to come up and say a few words, my mom pushed me toward the stage. "Say something, Sophie." She said, her voice sweet as honey, but her eyes sharp as a blade. It'd be weird if the eldest sister didn't speak. I stepped up, my heartbeat steady. Everyone looked at me like they were expecting a train wreck. I held the mic and looked across the room at faces that had all at one point doubted me, dismissed me, labeled me a past her prime dreamer, Chloe. I began calmly. "It's beautiful to see you loved, trusted, and celebrated by everyone here. Not all of us have had that. So if you do, hold on to it, because that's the most precious thing, silence." Then a few scattered claps. I stepped down, and then the sound of rotor blades. At first it was a faint hum, but it grew louder, sharper, slicing through the stillness. Heads turned upward. A helicopter was descending onto the landing pad just beyond the golden maple trees. My aunt lowered her champagne glass. My mom gripped the tablecloth. My cousin's eyes widened. Chloe looked at me, her mouth slightly open, speechless. Helicopter door swung open. Liam stepped out, wearing a charcoal suit tailored to perfection. His brown hair tousled from the wind, carrying a small gift box. He walked across the lawn like someone used to attention, but his eyes searched for only one person. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his deep voice cutting clearly through the stunned silence. "Air traffic." A few quiet chuckles, but mostly. He walked up, gently took my hand and whispered, "Did I make it in time?" I nodded, eyes still locked on my mother, frozen in her silk-cushioned chair, hands clenched white. She said nothing. No one did. Liam turned to the MC with a polite smile. "I'm not giving a speech, but if anyone was still wondering if I'm real, I hope that's cleared up now." The whole room erupted, not in laughter, but in wide eyes, hushed murmurs, and a feeling I couldn't quite name, but it felt a lot like collapse. I didn't need to win, but in that moment I knew I had reclaimed myself in front of the people who once made me question it the most. Liam didn't need to say much. His presence alone silenced every assumption in that room, like someone had hit pause. He walked confidently to greet everyone, starting with Aunt Sylvia, notorious for judging people by shoe brands, and watch sparkle. "Lovely to meet you. Chloe told me you used to design wedding dresses. I've just partnered with a fashion brand in Milan. Maybe we should talk." Aunt Sylvia nodded nonstop, her face flushed, and for the first time ever had nothing to criticize. Liam wasn't just impressive because of the helicopter or his looks, it was how he spoke. Confident, never arrogant, never forced. He shook hands with Uncle Patrick, who once said, "I probably made up a boyfriend to show off." Liam said simply, "Sophie mentioned you launched the first successful shipping company in this region. I admire entrepreneurs who start early." Uncle Patrick didn't just laugh. He patted Liam's back. "Looks like Sophie's finally got a good eye." My mom stood in the far corner, hand still resting on her wineglass, her eyes visibly scrambling to catch up. Liam didn't avoid her. He walked over, offered a firm but respectful handshake. "Margaret, it's a pleasure. Sophie's told me so much about you." She gave a slight nod, glancing at me before replying. "I've heard a lot about you, too." Things are clearer now. I wasn't sure if that was an acknowledgement or a quiet surrender, but for my mom saying nothing negative was already progress. My dad. Edward approached a few minutes later. He was a quiet man, always serious, like a contractor, evaluating a new foundation. Liam spoke first. "I understand you developed nearly the entire west end of the city." "That's visionary work, sir." Edward nodded and shook Liam's hand. No expression, but I caught the small twitch at the corner of his mouth, the same look he gave whenever he accepted something without admitting he was wrong. Then came my younger brother, Evan. He was standing near the cake table pretending to taste frosting, but his eyes hadn't left Liam since the moment he arrived. Evan had mocked me the most when I first talked about my long-distance relationship. I started to walk past when he called out. Con said softly, He doesn't look like I thought." I crossed my arms. "What do you mean?" He scratched his head. "Like I couldn't picture someone like that actually showing up here. I mean, he's good. Really good." I didn't say anything, but my eyes probably said enough. Evan looked down, then mumbled, "If I ever said anything out of line, I was just worried you'd get hurt." I stared at him. Not a full apology, but the closest thing I'd ever gotten from Evan. And for now, that was enough. The whole tone of the party had changed. The people who once whispered behind my back were now crowding around Liam, asking about his work, his flights, his life in the Middle East. They no longer looked at me with pity. Instead, there was curiosity, and for the first time in years, a hint of respect. Chloe walked over, cocktail in hand, eyes gleaming. "He's real and even better than I imagined. You didn't have to do anything." He changed the whole room with one handshake. Anyin smiled. "It wasn't about changing them. You know, that I just needed them to stop laughing." She nodded. "They're not laughing anymore. They're looking up to you." I glanced around and she was right. The room had shifted. I was no longer the whimsical daughter, no longer the last one unmarried. I was the woman who had built a career, a love, and a life, and for the first time, everyone had to acknowledge it. After Chloe's engagement party, I didn't expect any calls or messages from my family. I was used to the silence that followed our encounters. But this time something was different. Less than a week later, in the family group chat, usually reserved for food photos and church updates, I saw something that made me pause. A photo of Liam and me by the wedding cake posted by my mother with a caption, "Turns out Sophie didn't choose too badly after all." Below the photo, AITA commented, "Tall and charming too." And Uncle Thomas dropped a clapping emoji. No one mentioned the imaginary boyfriend. No one asked if the photo was real or edited. That same day, my dad, who never used social media and never showed interest in design, sent me a private link to an Architectural Digest article. The title read, "The Women Redesigning America's Boutique Hotels," and in it was my name, Sophie Bennett. He wrote only one line, "Nice article. Your section on contrast design was convincing." I read that message at least 3 times. Not because it was emotional, but because it was the first time my father ever acknowledged my work without calling it a phase or a risk. Those changes didn't come with a bang. They arrived softly like a passing breeze, but left behind something real. A week later, my mom called. She didn't start with a greeting, just said, "Are you busy? I wanted to ask you something." I pulled out my earbuds and sat on the balcony staring out at the high-rises of Chicago. "I'm listening." I wanted to ask for Aunt Vivian's living room. "Do you think gray or beige would go better with the lighting?" I nearly laughed. "You're calling to ask about interior design?" I asked, half skeptical, half amused. "Well, I saw the photos you posted on Instagram. They looked professional." I paused, then said, "Gra, if the room has west-facing windows." She nodded like she was actually taking notes. And then, "For some reason," she said slowly, "I know I've been hard on you. Maybe Maybe I was wrong to think there's only one path to success. I didn't respond because I knew if I did, I might not be able to keep my voice steady. Liam, she continued. He seemed serious and thoughtful. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, I think so too. When are you two thinking of having the wedding? Not sure yet, I replied. We're not rushing, but if we do, I'll let you know ahead of time. She didn't say more, but before hanging up, she added, if you need help, don't hesitate to ask. I'm not great with your modern design stuff, but I do know how to pick wedding flowers. As the screen dimmed after the call, I felt something settle inside me. Not because my mother had completely changed, but because for the first time, she opened a door, even if just slightly, to step toward me instead of waiting for me to come back to her. That evening, Liam returned from a short flight to Toronto. He set his bag down, walked straight to the kitchen, and asked, "You look different." Something happened. I told him everything. The family group photo, the article my dad sent the call with, my mom, the part about wedding flowers. He didn't say much, just poured me a glass of white wine and sat beside me. One step at a time, he said. They're moving. I nodded slowly, but it's real. Like a plane getting ready for takeoff. He smiled. It starts slow, but then it reaches a speed where it just lifts off. I leaned my head on his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. I knew they'd never be perfect. There would still be moments of doubt from my mom, times. My dad hesitated between acceptance and skepticism, but I never needed flawless approval. I just needed them to see me. And for the first time, I knew they were starting to. 3 months after that conversation with my mom, I received an invitation to speak at the Global Business Leadership Summit in Dubai, a gathering of founders, investors, and innovators reshaping their industries. Liam would be speaking on a panel about the future of urban aviation. I was invited to share how I built a cross-continental luxury design brand without a single venture capital dollar. I read the invitation email while sitting at my favorite cafe near the studio in Chicago, and I instantly knew what I had to do next. I picked up a pen and hand-wrote on 2 of the thick formal invitations printed by the organizers. Once you asked if I was serious about my life, this is the answer. I signed them, sealed the ivory envelopes with a wax stamp bearing my name, and mailed them. No email, no heads up, no explanation. 4 days later, my mom called. No small talk. What should we wear? I smiled. Evening business attire, but nothing over the top. Dubai, I will take care of the rest. My parents arrived on a golden afternoon. Liam picked them up in an electric car at Al Maktoum International, not to impress. We'd already done the helicopter thing. This time I just wanted everything to be in rhythm, just enough for them to see and not be able to unsee. Our apartment was on the 48th floor of a glass tower overlooking the palm-shaped man-made island. White and olive tones filled the space. Italian stone floors, floor-to-ceiling windows opening to a wide balcony with views of the Persian Gulf. On the coffee table sat the blueprint I was working on for a boutique hotel in Morocco. My mom stepped in silently. She looked around gently, touching the walnut Scandinavian-style table, then paused. In front of an abstract painting, one I had created and exhibited in Tokyo. This place, she began, then stopped. My dad stood by the window staring out at the sea. After a long pause, he spoke without turning around. I never imagined you living like this. I said nothing. I just offered them mint tea that Liam had brewed, and then showed them around the building. The hanging gardens, the infinity pool, the yoga studio overlooking the desert. That night, I walked onto the main stage of the summit in a custom cream suit, my hair in a low bun, wearing only small pearl earrings. Liam sat in the front row beside my parents. The spotlight cast a soft haze over the room of nearly 300 people, like a quiet theater. I didn't start with achievements or awards. I spoke about being underestimated, about what it felt like to sit in a room full of family and still feel unheard, about the loneliness of being labeled the one who chose wrong. I said there were days I lived only on passion and belief in myself, because no one else did. I talked about learning to build my own seat when no one would offer one. The room was silent. I looked down at the front row. My mom adjusted her collar. My dad sat with his hands clasped on his lap, eyes fixed on me. After the talk, I stepped down into a stream of people shaking hands, exchanging cards, asking to collaborate. A Swiss executive wanted me to design their new European hotel chain. A Dubai publisher wanted to write a book about my journey. My dad stood beside me, nodding and shaking hands like he was my manager. And my mom, she only said one thing to Liam as we sat down for dinner at a rooftop restaurant. "Thank you for believing in her when we didn't know what to believe in." Liam smiled. "You don't need to thank me. Sophie did it all on her own. I just stood beside her. I didn't expect redemption or apologies." But that look in my mother's eyes for the first time was unmistakably pride. And I understood success isn't about proving who is right or wrong. It's about reclaiming your freedom, the freedom to live, to choose, and to be seen as who you always believed you were. As I stepped off the stage that night, the spotlight still glowed behind me. The applause had faded, but in my heart something still echoed like the sound of my past. From all the years I fought to keep from being swallowed by doubt. I didn't search for my parents' eyes as I left the stage, but I felt them as clearly as standing in the rain. You don't need to look up to know the drops are falling. Liam was the first to hug me. He whispered in my ear, "You just made the whole room go silent, and you just made me fall in love with you all over again." We returned to the front row where my parents were still seated. My mom dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She avoided my gaze, but that motion for the first time in years wasn't to hide discomfort, but to hold back emotion. My dad didn't cry. I don't think he knows how, but he was the first to stand when the talk ended, and the last to stop clapping after everyone else sat down. The slowness of his applause meant more to me than any compliment ever written. After dinner, as the crowd thinned out, he approached me, hands in his dress pants, face calm but familiar. "You know," he began, his voice low and a bit shaky, "I used to think art was just a hobby, that you were chasing something vague. I stayed quiet, I waited, but tonight I saw the people listening to you. I saw how they looked at you, and I realized you're not just creating beauty, you're creating value for yourself, for others, for this world." He paused, then said slowly, clearly, "I'm proud of you, Sophie." I had never heard him say those words, not when I got into college, not when I opened my first studio, not when I made the magazine cover, but this time in a country halfway across the world, in front of hundreds of strangers. I heard it. I nodded a soft gesture of gratitude. And strangely, I didn't cry. Maybe because I had grown enough to understand. Not everyone knows how to love you the right way from the start. But when they finally learn, their recognition isn't just a reward, it's a milestone, the end of a long, lonely road. My mom came over afterward. She was quiet for a few seconds, then gently smoothed the shoulder of my jacket, just like she used to do when I had school competitions as a kid. "You spoke beautifully." Honestly, her voice softened. "I think I was so afraid of you failing that I didn't realize you had already succeeded in your own way." I rested my hand lightly on her shoulder. "I understand. And I've never blamed you for worrying. I just wish you'd believed in me sooner." "I wish that too," she whispered. "But I'm here now today to tell you, I won't doubt you again." We didn't need to hug tightly. We just stood there side by side, looking out from the hotel balcony where the lights of Dubai flickered like stars sewn onto velvet. That night back at the apartment, Liam and I opened a bottle of chilled white wine. He poured 2 glasses, but only took a sip before setting his down. Tonight, he said, "You didn't just make them see you. You made them believe in you." I rested my head on his shoulder. I didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. No more anger, no more regret. Because for the first time, I knew I had been heard, not by a conference room, not by the media, but by the very people who once believed I couldn't do it. The Dubai trip ended with a late breakfast on the hotel rooftop where soft sunlight fell over the pastry tray and steaming espresso cups. My mom asked Liam about his upcoming project in Istanbul. My dad sat reading a financial article, nodding occasionally as I talked about my next meeting in Milan. Everything felt strangely natural, as if we'd always shared this rhythm, as if the years of tension and distance had never existed. But I knew to have this peaceful morning I had walked a very long road. At the airport, I simply said, "Thank you for coming." No reminders. No quiet hope that they'd change completely. I didn't need that anymore. On the way back to the apartment, Liam held my hand, stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I've never seen you this strong." I smiled. "It's not because I'm trying to prove anything anymore. It's because I've finally let go. Letting go not of the dream, but of the expectation of being accepted. And that more than anything made me free. I didn't need them to understand every decision I made, every move I packed for every late meeting across time zones. I didn't need them to love Liam or admire my work. I didn't need them to call me an amazing daughter. The only thing I needed was to invite them to the front row and let them see who I had become. Not to get even, but so I'd never have to bow my head again. Back in Chicago, I received an email from the summit organizers. They wanted to use my speech as the opening feature for next year's program. I reread the excerpt they selected. Some people grow up with support, some fight through doubt. But whoever you are, if you believe in your path, don't wait for a green light. Keep walking. Let them figure out how to catch up. I sat in the studio, sunlight spilling through the window. A design draft for a seaside resort in Greece was open on my screen. My phone rang. A client from Singapore wanted to discuss a new project. My schedule for next month was packed. Florence, Tokyo, then back to New York, but I didn't feel tired. On the contrary, I felt light. I hadn't won through arguments. Not by proving myself in every phone call. I didn't need to walk them through every stage of my life to explain it all. I won by staying true to myself and doing it long enough that no one could deny it. Someone once said, "Success is the gift you give yourself." But to me, it's also an unspoken message. You were never wrong for choosing yourself. I still keep the invitation I sent my parents. Cream-colored paper, black ink, and a slanted hand tucked into the drawer beside my bed. Every time I open it by chance, I smile. Not because I remember the doubtful voices, the disappointed glances, or those cold family dinners, but because I remember the moment they sat there in that lit-up hall, with nothing left to say except to applaud, and me with nothing left to wait for except the peace within myself. Sophie's story is proof that you don't need anyone's approval to become the best version of yourself. She chose her own path, stayed true to her passion, and kept going, despite doubt and dismissal. Her success didn't come from pleasing her family. It came from living honestly, standing by her beliefs, and never giving up. Sometimes the sweetest form of revenge is letting those who once doubted you sit front row and watch you shine. What do you think of Sophie's journey and how she reclaimed her worth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and inspiring stories about family and life.